Is now the right time to start taking on new rehab projects? I asked that question and many more to pro rehabber Joe Rose here on the Fearless Investor Podcast. Hey, welcome into the Fearless Investor Podcast. You're listening to me, Kyle Stanley, and thank you so much for joining in on the show today. And I also want to give a big thank you to Laura Powers. She left a review on our podcast, and here's what she said. She said, "Stay up to date on market changes. This is such a great show to know what's happening right now, and a great host. Glad I discovered the show." Thank you so much, Laura, for those positive words. And also, if you have not already, make sure to go to the Apple or Google or Spotify or wherever platform that you're listening on for podcasts and review. Leave those 5 stars. We would really love that. It helps us get out to more people, and you have a chance of being mentioned on the show if you do leave a review, especially a sparkling one. All right, thanks so much again for joining here, guys. But I'm really excited today because we're going to talk to Joe Rose. He's local here to Fresno, California, where I'm at. And Joe is a guy that had 5 or more rehab projects going on all when this COVID stuff happened. And when we recorded this, he was really nervous about what those were going to do when he put them back on the market. But stay to the end. I've got some updates for you on how those projects are doing, and it may give you some confidence of what to do next in your investing strategies, especially when it comes to real estate. So let's get to it with Joe Rose. Hey guys, welcome into another episode of the Fearless Investor, and we have got Joe Rose. Although he is local, we're still quarantined here, so can't really get that social distancing between us. We got to do Zoom, which is totally fine. But Joe, thanks so much for being on the show with us.
No worries. I appreciate you having me, Kyle.
All right, awesome. So Joe, what is your most interesting investing story that you've come across in your years of real estate?
Well, you know what? There's one that I have that came in mind, and it just happened recently. This was last year. And I went to this property. It was out in Raymond, California, one of those properties I was telling you about. And the seller was selling his property, and he was moving out of state back to Utah. And they basically just told me, "Hey, look, I got to get out of here. I have this dog here." And honestly, at that time, my wife and I were looking for another pet, or another dog, anyways, to accompany the one we have already. And it just so happens he's like, "Hey, you want my dog?" Honestly, at that time, I was like, "Yeah, I really don't want your dog." And this is kind of weird. He's like, "Well, either," and he made me feel really bad. And this is a horrible story, but he said, "Either you take him, or I'm going to put a bullet in his head and bury him in the backyard." He was totally playing. I get it, but that I said, "Okay, man, you got me. I'll take your dog." And he's a great dog, though. I mean, he was a puppy at the time. He still is. So he's only.
I was gonna say, is that him barking in the background?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's barking at the neighbor's landscaper right now. So
that's awesome.
One of the two. But yeah, it was pretty interesting to say the least. Just because I went to go sign a contract with that seller there, and I came home with the dog, and the wife was excited though. She was happy to find another companion.
Yeah, and you and I talked about it with that one property that I had 2 dogs chained to a lot. I didn't, but I found 2 dogs chained to a lot. So I mean, you know, we're saving people and saving dogs. So
hey, do what we can, right?
That's awesome, man. Well, thank you for doing that. And also, just want to kind of dive into your story. And yours is an interesting one. You've had probably a route that I really haven't heard of from a lot of people in terms of especially like the business model where you started with real estate investing. But I would like to just rewind the clock. Who is Joe Rose? Who was he before real estate? And bring us up to speed of where you're at now.
Okay, well, before real estate, and this is going back 16, 17 years, I actually was on a truck. I delivered Coca-Cola, and before that, I delivered beer. So this is a totally different transition. Real estate is something I've always wanted to get into, but it was kind of hard to make that jump when you're, in that position. So when I was able to finally, hey, look, when I save enough money, I'm going to start taking the classes, the courses to get my real estate license. I got it in 2004. And at the time, real estate was booming. So it was the perfect time for me to get into that market. Then fast forward about 10 years, well, actually a few years, and when the market crashed, that's when I had to totally transition from being like a buyer's type agent to working for a foreclosure house. and
Okay.
doing BPOs, the broker price opinions for all those banks. I got to the point where I was doing about 80 to 100 BPOs a month. And basically
Wow.
what that is just cranking out property valuations. So I got really good at honing in value for properties, which translates to what we do now is figuring out that ARV.
Hmm.
And I got real good at it. So it's like doing these mini appraisals. I mean, 10, 15 a day sometimes, and just cranking them out. And like I said, 80 to 100, I was really burnt out. I think it ruined my eyes staring at that
Oh,
computer all
I'm
day.
sure.
Yeah, and then a few years after that, I met an investor through that particular company, and we got into the Home Investor franchise. And he brought me along and said, "Hey, look, I want you to run this franchise for me here locally." And I said, "Okay, great." We had a pretty good, as far as agreement, to have me full partner in a few years, and that's basically where we are now. Got ahead and got into that full partnership, and we're able to buy and flip properties here in the Valley, which has been pretty fun for the last, I guess, 5.5 years now.
That's awesome. So the one thing that, you and I talked about before jumping on this interview that I think is very unique is that you got into a franchise, which,
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that, especially today, they learn from either having a mentor through a YouTube channel, or like for me, paying for education. And everyone has their own reflection of, hey, if I could rewind the clock,
Yeah.
10 years when I made that decision, here's what I would have done differently.
Right.
But I guess my question is, before we get into that side of it, because I do want to know, was it worth it to get into a franchise? What does that look like? What is the structure? What is the advantages of that you saw in the beginning of joining a franchise?
Well, the biggest advantage, which this works for a lot of people, is basically that everything's done for you. They set up your marketing portals, they set up your social media portals, everything funnels through them and then comes back to you. So they have this huge nationwide network, so they're able to platform it all across the U.S. And there's I think in the Valley here we have 5 different franchises that are still actually not all of them are operational, but just a few. I think 3 or 4 of them are operational now. And then down south in LA, there's a bunch out there. So California was one of the later states because they didn't allow that particular type of franchise in up until about maybe 8 years ago. And so they 8 to 10 years ago. So then now they're able to bring those in. That model is great for I guess the beginning investor just really didn't have an angle and figure out how to do it. So that was a good place. It's just paying for the franchise initially, going to their training facilities out in Texas, and then taking that back home and waiting for the phone to ring. And that's basically all we did.
So, and that is attractive, because in the beginning, I think some of the scary things, I remember going back to when I was a first-time investor, the scary thing was, how was I going to find properties?
Right.
How was I going to find the money to pay for the properties? And some of the other things that I was worried about are, how am I going to know for sure what the ARV is? If I'm off even 5%, that's a huge deal. So it sounds like even evaluating deals, the franchise was helping you with that.
Yeah, initially they had some trainings with that. I already had the background, so it's easy for me to just jump into it. Being with all those BPOs I did gave me a ton of practice to figure out what a true value is. And I had to do for those banks was as is condition versus rehab condition. Anyways, I was doing that back then. So now when I got into the franchise, I was like, okay, yeah, this is a no-brainer. Give me 5 minutes, I'll be able to figure that out. So that was a good model that they helped you with that stuff. They gave you some, things that you can go online and incorporate with your business to help you figure those out. Because that's the absolute hardest thing to do sometimes, is to figure out if you have a deal or not and how much rehab costs. That's the one thing I struggle with. I didn't have any experience with rehab costs. I'm like, oh yeah, kitchen remodel, maybe $5,000. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and that's so case by case with whatever contract you're working with. You can have a contractor that gives you a bid for 20 grand, another that gives you a bid for 50 grand. So it's really tough to decipher that.
Yeah. The one thing that they didn't really help you out with is, because they had models for wholesaling, and full retail. But they didn't help you with, okay, what to do with the property once you have it, and my partner Rick, he's basically had some experience with flipping already. So he's like, yeah, we'll just get some guys together and, put this house back to where it should be. And you put on the market since you're licensed, and hey, we're good. And that worked for a while. The first year we bought like 26 houses that we were trying to rehab, and it was just way too many.
You say 26?
Yeah.
Wow.
20. And we didn't have, we got to the point where we had enough funds to buy the first few. Then we had to figure out, okay, how we're going to get the money from the other projects coming on board, and what do we do with some of these? So he ended up keeping a lot of them as rentals, which helped out because he was able to create a revenue stream for himself, which was part of our master plan anyways, for him to gain properties so I can be full partners in a couple of years. So we expedited that early on so you can have those property acquisitions, and he just kept them. And then we just, pulling a team together for the actual work, man, that's tough. Initially, when you don't have the right guys, you're like, this is taking forever. Why is it 4 months and you're still haven't sold this property?
Yep. Well, so one of the things, I'm a numbers guy. One of the things that I just like to see is the cost and the benefit versus, just doing it yourself. So, I know that most people here in the Central Valley, what they're looking for is anywhere between, low end $20,000 profit on a flip to a high end, or to like a nice, comfortable numbers about $30,000. So with that being said, with all these other costs that it sounds like you had with a franchise and having to split, some commissions and everything, what was kind of those numbers, either the low end or the average that you were looking for?
In the beginning, it was basically, let's see if we can make anything on any property. It didn't really have a true number, but as we progressed, we started figuring out, okay, that having a franchise is more expensive than doing it on your own. Initially, you were able to acquire more, have those acquisitions early, but what to do with those when you have them is a different story. So we started figuring out, okay, it's going to cost us X amount of dollars per deal. If you're incorporating advertising costs, and then you actually have to pay them every time you purchase a property, a percentage of the sale. So we make sure you're incorporating that. And our deal, I had to range it towards the $40,000 profit. So we can pay everything down and hopefully end up with that $25,000 to $30,000 range as far as profit. And that made it. And what happened was, when we were just starting, there wasn't that many guys in the game, and every year there was more, and every year there was more. So that model didn't fit. It was hard to compete, and trying to net 40. So just so you could pay everything off and have some profit at the end, or even try to get to 50, 45 would be that sweet spot. If you can get there, if you're closer to 20, 25, you get eat up. All your profits will be eat up just with costs. And so, I started, backpedaling a little bit as far as the property acquisition, and say, hey, look, we're only going to get sweet deals. So we're going to cherry pick our deals so we can have that money to go ahead and pay for everything, and then still have enough money for advertising and have enough money for us, and, go from there. There's the slim deals for that franchise model doesn't necessarily work all the time.
Got it.
And we weren't big on wholesaling. We love to keep the properties for some reason.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that I've learned in this business is you're either going to pay for deals with time or with money. And it sounded like in the beginning, you felt like the money was worth it to be able to save you some time. Is that kind of the balance that you looked at?
Yeah, pretty much. There was there had to be that sweet spot when you have that balance. And initially we ran with skinny deals because if we can make anything, it's going to help pay for the next 3 projects. So, but then when we looked at it down the road, it was like our construction costs were going up because we didn't have enough guys to maintain all the properties or have them working all the time, because they were all over the place and doing little jobs here and there. So our holding time just became bigger and bigger and bigger. And we're like, okay, this is not working. This is definitely not working. So as you hold the property, as the longer you hold the property, your profit margins were shrinking.
Exactly. Those holding costs are something people don't really think a lot of in the beginning.
No. So now then we put in a model. Okay, look, every property purchase, it's got to net us X amount of dollars, and we're going to factor in about 6 months worth of holding costs into that model. So that way we knew, okay, if we buy this property, we're factoring 6 months. And if we do it faster, great, we made a little more money. Fine. That's okay with us.
Yeah.
We definitely rolled that in there so we can be safer with those projections.
Now, you kind of hinted towards it, but I don't want to assume anything. Going back when you made this decision, would you go the franchise route again?
Honestly, probably not. Just with the amount of people that kept coming in and taking from there, that particular model that they ran with for so many years never really changed. And they didn't really adapt with the time. So that's where, I see that if we were more nimble and smaller and say, okay, we can adjust some things here, put some more marketing dollars this way, or go this route to acquire more properties instead of trying to, extend our profit margin so we can pay them.
Mm-hmm.
That's where, it changed for us in the last couple of years. We're like, okay, look, you're not getting the
Not
leads.
making as much sense.
Yeah. Not making, yeah, exactly. Not making as much sense as it was before. So we definitely had to kind of, see where are options now. And that's kind of where we are now. It's like, well, what are our options? Can we still be fruitful with this franchise, or do we go ahead and take what we learned and move on from there? And they make it a little tougher because you have to sign a non-compete and all that stuff. But in California, you really can't hold you to a non-compete. So.
All right. Well, hey, you've got some decisions to make, it sounds like, in your business, but either way, I mean, you're pumping out deals, and right now, especially, in this economy and not knowing what's going to happen next. I know that you were telling me before we jumped on this interview, you've got some deals that are ready to be put on the market. As we're doing this interview, it's right now middle of April. But where do you feel like your confidence level is at where those properties are going to hopefully sell for what you want them to?
I honestly, right now, I've had a pretty good track record as far as, getting what we want from the properties. And that's just knowing that ARV. Okay. What we don't know now is how, our current situation is going to affect those ARVs. So, I'm sticking with the same model right now because that's what we acquired the property in January. That's what we figured it was going to be to this point. We're like, okay, well, the market really hasn't changed a whole lot in our local area as far as values. You don't see a lot of people diving off, or a lot of properties not on the market. There's still a shortage of properties for the amount of buyers that are still available out there, and that's where I see it as from the realtor side. It's like, okay, I put my realtor hat on and say, look, let me go see how many pendings are happening in Fresno right now. Let's go check on the inventory levels, and then you see, okay, yeah, this particular range under $250,000, you're definitely selling those properties. It's still affordable for people, and it's still cheaper to buy than rent. Rental values haven't dropped off because of this little dip. Eventually, those may drop off in the future if people are out of work. But I think the people that are currently out of work weren't necessarily in the market to buy a home. You know what I mean? And those are those hourly workers, the department store workers, the restaurant workers, where they might have been on the cusp. But the people that are still employed now, the salary workers, are still in that game to purchase homes. So, at this point, I think we're going to be okay. 2 months from now, we might see somewhat of a dip, and that's kind of where I'm projecting that out for a couple months. But right now, put it on and you hope for the best. There's not enough numbers out there.
I think that was some really good information. I want to just go over that one more time with you, because you said, inventory, if you have low inventory, essentially just supply and demand. If you have a high amount of demand but low supply, then it shouldn't affect the sellers too much. Mention some of those other things again for me if you can.
So like what we're talking about is just that inventory level. When it's low like this, it's still attractive for buyers to get out there and attractive for sellers to sell. Those particular buyers that are available and ready to buy, they have options now to negotiate just a little bit, knowing that there may not be as many buyers as there were a few months back. And that's the biggest difference right now with this, that what we're going into the next couple months is figuring out, okay, can we withhold this price level? Can we, are we going to get through this without any major dips? And it looks like the amount of buyers that are out there currently will kind of get us through this time right now and get us into those later months or into the summer months, hopefully, where everybody's back to work, and go from there.
Yeah, that key word there, hopefully, right?
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
all we have right now. We hope for, things to change. We hope for, our properties to sell. And that's all we're banking on, because in say 6 months or 8 months from now, we'll be able to reflect and see what happened during this time frame. Right now, it's way too early to figure out if there's going to be any major market adjustments until we get to that point. And hopefully, there's not too many, because, if people get back to work, and honestly, the Valley here, we haven't been majorly hit with the virus. And I think that is a testament to what we're doing now as far as keeping our social distancing, and the simple fact that we're not a super dense area. Fresno's pretty widespread as far as the county. And so, the people that contracted the virus are pretty localized. Yeah, the spread can still happen if we're not, careful. But for now, because of the area we live in, I think that's helping us try to navigate through this, and we'll be out of it a lot sooner than some of the other more dense populations.
I hope you're right. I really, I can see it going both ways, because I feel like sometimes Fresno is late to the party on a lot of things. But
that's true.
I guess, you've been doing a lot of, you mentioned the wholesaling and the flipping and a few buy and holds. Do you feel like you're driving your exit strategy right now in one way or another just because of what's going on?
Honestly, we're taking a step back from what we normally do, and we were going to roll out some new programs this year before all this changed. We were going to start working with sellers to do profit sharing versus us acquiring the property and doing the rehab for those particular sellers, and then profit sharing at the end when we go to resell. We're going to roll out different programs just so we can have more acquisitions throughout the year. But since it's changed, we definitely have to change that model. And now our advertising, we basically held back a little bit because, again, it's all about saving capital so you can expect the worst, during the situation, and figure out what's your best recourse moving forward. So right now I'm navigating through a lot of different things and basically learning about, hey, well, you, of course, if you're Airbnbs, I'm looking into stuff like that, looking into, buy and holds are great, but when I look at buy and holds now, it has to be a killer deal. And honestly, if you have a Section 8 renter, that's probably your best bet at this point. You got somebody that's going to bring in money every month. And just basically looking at what the market's going to, predicate for us. We're looking at all different avenues, and not one particular avenue that just the buy and holds or the buy and flips. It's going to be changing for us in the next few months. And honestly, I think that's going to be our model throughout the year. It's just trying to adapt and network more. And honestly, I'm probably the worst guy to network. I just don't do it. I don't know. It's not because I don't like to. I love talking to people. As you can see, I talk a lot. But at the same token, I just, I don't make that phone call. I mean, people reach out to me and I love it. But I just don't get. But I'm changing that aspect of our management now, because I really have to do this. This is a prime time for me to get out there, and everybody that's in this industry to go ahead and look to other people to see what they're doing.
Yep.
And see if you can incorporate some of those ideas into your business. And that's where it's super important to, like I said, reach out and get to those points, because you could be at a loss. That's when the foreclosure or the market crash in 2008, I was at a complete loss of what to do. I don't want to be in that position anymore. So now, you get into this era, you see some changes, and you start adapting quickly versus letting it happen to you. You happen through the market. You would interject yourself and put yourself in position to succeed, and finding people that are succeeding and model some of the things they do if it fits within your business.
Exactly. Well, I think the big thing you just said there is networking. I call it collaboration, really, because I
Yeah.
feel like networking it feels like such a boring word, but collaboration,
Collaborate.
especially in today's world, podcasts, with
Yeah.
YouTube, with the ability to be able to connect with people that are at such a high level so easily today. There's just not as many boundaries between people to be able to connect, and
Right.
that allows for a lot more collaboration. So I'm glad to hear that that is one of your focuses right now.
Yeah. Honestly, I've learned more in the last couple months than I did in the last 5 years, doing one model, sticking with one
Right.
particular thing and allowing the franchise to kind of uh, dictate what we're going to do. And now it's like, okay, wow, there's these things, people are doing this stuff here, and these guys are doing this here. I'm like, okay, great, I can, change and that's all the part about being a little more nimble and evolving a little bit more to what the situation has to offer. This thing is unprecedented. We never, you know, we haven't gone through this yet. So now it's like, okay, people are doing well right now. Okay, let's see what they're doing that's helping themselves out. And maybe we can go ahead and incorporate some of those things. And I love that aspect of it. I mean, to be honest with you, your show in particular, you're putting out great content. There's numerous guys that you can cherry pick ideas from here and there. And I'm like, okay, great. This is awesome. I got one network where I can.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's good
Thanks,
stuff.
man.
Man. Yeah, absolutely.
I'll pay you after the show.
Yeah.
Well, Joe, thank you so much for being on the show. You brought a ton of value today. Is there any last words that you have for the audience with everything that's just going on right now?
No, honestly, just be safe. Take care of yourself. And like I said, adapt and change to what you have in front of you, because we don't know how this is going to end. We don't know where it's going to end. We don't know what position we're going to be in to help either. So if I'm if I can help anybody just with, words of wisdom, or just having a conversation, is figure out what we can do for each other, I'm all for it.
Awesome. Hey, thanks so much for joining us today, Joe, and helping our audience to conquer the world of investing. We appreciate you.
Absolutely. Appreciate it, Kyle.
All right. We've got show notes for this one at fearlesskyle.com/Joe Rose. Just as it sounds, JoeRose. And Joe, like I mentioned, especially in the interview, we were kind of talking about, hey, what's it going to look like when these sell? Well, guess what, guys? Joe actually listed one of them about 2 weeks ago. He got 9 offers in 24 hours. There were over 30 showings, and he sold it for above asking price. I think it was over $5,000 for asking price. So that showed me that people are still buying right now, and they're buying in the masses. So what it gave me was the confidence to go out and get my own deal. So I actually just got one under contract as well. A lot more of a spread. That would be the biggest advice that I have right now is, if you're just getting started, maybe partner with someone, or continue to learn and figure out what's going on, because it's going to be tough for you to just jump into it right now. But B, make sure there is enough meat on the bones. If you were needing that 10 to 15% ROI, maybe now you're looking at a 20% ROI, just in case the market does go down. But again, the show notes for this one, fearlesskyle.com/Joe Rose. And thank you again for joining us today on The Fearless Investor and conquering the world of investing. We will see you next time.